In our district, we are dealing with many students that are less than proficient in core subjects, have behavior issues, and lack parental involvement. Today's training will address these critical issues using flipped learning as a way to engage students in a non-traditional way. Flipped learning is also a way for you as educators to embark on a new and refreshing way to promote student success. Okay, so let's get into it. What is flipped learning? So in a typical classroom setting, students are spending their time in class receiving instruction from a teacher. New concepts are introduced and explained to the group. Students are then sent home with the task of putting information into action. For many of our students, this is a daunting task, as they don't have the support needed at home to do what is being asked of them. This can be frustrating, and as you might imagine, many students feel hopeless and give up. So how can flipped learning support our students, setting them up for increased success? A flipped classroom actually works in reverse of the traditional model. Students spend their time at home beginning to learn new concepts, returning ready to carry out higher level tasks in the classroom. This affords our students the opportunity to get feedback, ask questions, and have collaborative interaction with their peers. The flipped classroom allows students to take ownership and begin a more meaningful learning process. This collaborative learning process promotes critical thinking and problem-solving skills. These are skills that many of our students lack today. Flipped learning has been shown to increase proficiency by providing equity and support for those students that need it most. Now, flipped learning is not a fad. In fact, in some form, flipped learning has been around for quite some time. Just as in higher education, professors have been assigning readings and videos, expecting students to return to class for discussion. And although technology enhances flipped learning, it is not necessary. So in essence, this type of learning exposes students to the higher level thinking and learning needed for college and career. Now, let's take a look at some best practices for flipped learning. First, flipped learning does not have to be an unreasonable amount of work on the teacher. Remember, this is about students taking ownership, so allow them to be involved in the process. Start slow. There's no need to flip your whole world. Try one lesson and progress from there. Assess students before giving them content. Use a savvy app to see what your students already know and give them some context in class. Use your students to select and review videos about the material. Have students come up with discussion questions and activities and step aside. Allow them to take the ownership required to increase proficiency by teaching your students to be higher level thinkers and learners. Now, what about students who lack access to adequate technology? Use materials that can be viewed on mobile devices. Extend lab hours and in-class computer time for students who need it. Download material onto flash drives. And lastly, remember, flipped learning does not always have to be via technology. Articles, blogs, print material out for students. Most of our students, though, do have mobile devices, so it may just mean they spend time with your video on YouTube versus, well, whatever they're normally viewing. Again, it's about students taking ownership. So as with anything, there are challenges as well as benefits. We've talked about the benefits of flipped learning. Now let's talk about the challenges. One challenge might be students that may not respond to flipped learning, simply not viewing the material for class. Well, this is something that will always exist and is not much different than a student not doing homework. I believe it's an opportunity, however. You might pair the unprepared student with a buddy that can work with them to catch them up to speed. This allows for an instance of peer-to-peer teaching. Some challenges for educators include having to learn new technology and spending time changing the existing curriculum. It can definitely be overwhelming. So let's review again those best practices. A flipped classroom actually works in reverse. Flipped learning is not a fad and is not really a new technique. Think John Dewey and student-centered learning. When flipping your classroom, start slow. Let your students take ownership and get out of the way. I hope you've enjoyed this training and will try using flipped learning in one of your upcoming lessons. Stay tuned for our next video in the series, Flipping History, a Lesson Plan. Thanks for watching.
Created using Powtoon.